So we have two intervention pieces left. We're going to move out of the counseling intervention piece, and we will now move into the collaborative piece. And this is the piece where we can collaborate with teachers, and also the piece where we can collaborate with parents, caregivers, guardians. Okay. So one thing, the Ross Green method, I'm going to give you the broad overview of as we do this today. One piece that I should point out, I spent a full week, 6 hours a day for 5 days of training with Dr. Green several years ago, and I'm going to collapse that into 30 to 45 minutes now. All right. Just so you can get an overview of it. On the other hand, Dr. Green is very unselfish with his material. So he has a website where the majority of his material is available for free. There are also videos of him discussing the material. And it's the name of the website is Lives in the Balance. I can't remember if it's .org or .com. But if you go to Lives in the Balance, you can get all the material that I'm going to show you today, and you can spend more time on it. But I wanted to give you an overview of this because as I was putting together the presentation on the mentalization-based counseling and attachment, I realized that so much of what the developers of mentalization-based work focused on overlapped very consistently with Dr. Green's work. And I thought it was a good way to put it together. Another piece which I'll just quickly put out there, which I don't have time to talk about today, is the Ruler program from the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence overlaps quite a bit with what we were talking about with mentalization-based work. The nuance of that is the Ruler approach is if we look at the public health model, it's a tier 1 prevention type of model where you implement Ruler in a school to give everyone universal exposure to the schools of recognizing emotions, understanding emotions, labeling emotions, expressing emotions, and regulating emotions. That's everything that comes from a secure attachment, right? It's good for children to learn explicitly about that. Even if they have a secure attachment, it can be helpful to learn about that. Many years ago, well, about 15 years ago, I worked pretty closely with Dr. Brackett, and we were talking about how this can be implemented with the Ruler program can be implemented with high-risk students. That was before I knew about mentalization-based counseling. But now I see that there's a tremendous overlap between the two there as well. Those of you who work in early childhood, preschool, kindergarten, have you ever learned about something called Floor Time by Dr. Stanley Greenspan? Dr. Greenspan was down in the D.C. area, I think Georgetown, but I can't remember if it was Georgetown. If you're working with young children, so if you work a lot with preschool through second grade, you can still find Dr. Greenspan's work. It's Stanley Greenspan, and it's called Floor Time. Back in the late 90s, it was predominantly focused on in Connecticut, and all the RESCs were running workshops on it and things like that. Again, I didn't know it at the time, but it's all part of the attachment theory work, and mentalization-based counseling. In fact, there's a book I'll send you a reference to called Mentalization-Based Therapy with Children, and there's frequent references to Dr. Greenspan's work. So I had done that training in, 1997 or 98 or something like that. And these mentalization-based counseling people hadn't even started their work yet. So it's interesting how things all fit together. Okay. So Dr. Green. So the big overriding message from Ross Greene's work on collaborative problem solving is moving away from the lens of students do well if they want to students do well if they can. Or if you watch Dr. Greene's videos, it's students do well if they wanna. And we change that to students do well if they can. And the goal of our work with young people is to help them acquire the skills so that they can do better. And as he puts it, no student, and I would say it's very rare for a student rather than talking absolutes, it's very rare for a student to do badly on purpose. If they're capable of doing well, they typically will. Okay. What's a situation where a student is capable of doing well but doesn't, that you might have come across?
Negative self-perception.
Negative self-perception is one. How do they develop that negative self-perception?
If their previous response, if they have failed in their lives in the past and it wasn't perceived well by maybe their caregivers?
Yeah, or their teachers.
Or teachers?
Yeah. So the situation I've noticed where students are capable of doing well but don't is usually in the middle school to early high school age group. And the comment will be something like, I'm not doing that teacher's homework. I'll do the homework for that teacher, but I'm not doing it for the math teacher. He hates me. So that's a student who can do well, but doesn't want to. And that's because of a poor relationship, right? Feeling undervalued or devalued or less than. And so why should I make an effort when this person thinks so poorly of me? And the other internal thought is, and there's nothing I can do to change that, right? I remember a 7th grade boy saying, when I said to him, why are you doing what you're supposed to in all your classes, but not in your math class? And he said very directly, with all the sincerity that you could see in a 7th grader, you know, we'll call him Mr. Brown. You know Mr. Brown? Have you ever seen him? Yes, I've seen him. Your math teacher? Yes, I've seen him. You know how he's got that bald head? Yes, I do. Well, my goal when I go to math class is to see how red I can make the top of his stupid bald head by the time he throws me out of class. Like, okay, this is going to be hard to fix. So he could do better, but he didn't want to. And sometimes we see that with those middle school age students. Okay. So with this idea of students do well if they can, then the focus is if students aren't being successful, it's because they don't have the skills, or there's an unsolved problem and they don't know how to solve it. So then the focus is on collaborating with the student and with the teacher or the parent, depending on the situation we're navigating, to get the problem solved. And the first thing that we want to look at is what are the skills and the unsolved problems. And that's what's referred to as the ALSUP. And I think if I click this, it'll come up for us, but since I can't access all parts of my Google account, I don't know. So let's take a look and see what happens here. Yeah, maybe it's not going to open for us. Let's see. Yeah. It's just a bigger picture of that, so it's not a big deal. In one of these files that was in the handouts, I'll link these for you guys so that you can have them once I get things cleared up. But if you take a look here, it's a smaller, so I need my glasses. This is the list of lagging skills. And some have to do with executive function, some have to do with expressing emotions, some have to do with rigid thinking and not being able to adapt and so forth. So a lot of the things that we've already talked about. Here they are bigger so you can read them. Okay, I forgot I did that. Look at the last one on this list. Actually, the last two on this list. These last two are what we've been talking about today, I think, right? And phrased very clearly, quite clearly, with what we've been talking about. So handling unpredictability, ambiguity. So basically what that one is saying is looking for security, looking for routine, knowing what to expect, and having trouble with that is a lagging skill. Because school days, although they're quite routine, there are changes that come up. And then the second to last one, difficulty empathizing with others, appreciating another person's perspective or point of view. That's the 3 R's of mentalization, right? Reflecting, reasoning, and reading people's minds. So that's looked at as a lagging skill in this model. So all that work that we talked about this morning gets encapsulated nicely in Ross Green's model if we want to help a teacher to understand that the challenges that the student is facing are because they're lacking these particular skills. And then we could talk about the reason they lack these skills is because of their developmental background and the chaotic home situation or the disrupted early life or challenging situations that he or she has faced. Without getting into all the depth of what we understand as mental health providers, you can give that quick overview and say, these are some of the skills that are typically impacted. Let's look and see which ones are the biggest priorities for this student. And it's, there's a guide to how to go through it on his website, but it's pretty straightforward. You just take a look at the skills. You have to be careful because some teachers will say the student's lacking absolutely every skill, and then you want to prioritize it. So the way I tend to prioritize it is if the student were to acquire 5 of these skills that would make it easier for you to wake up on Monday morning and go to work with this child still being in your classroom, which 5 of these skills would you want the child to have to make you face the week more optimistically with this student in your classroom? And that usually can help them focus in. And we can't target everything at once, but let's start somewhere, basically. Okay. And then we look at what the unsolved problems are, along with the lagging skills. That comes next. Let me see if I made this one bigger. So we'll take a look. Can you guys read that? Okay, so that you could see the school ones. Getting tasks completed. Either starting tasks or completing tasks. Those are 2 different problems, by the way. So if a student's not getting tasks done, it's either because they're not getting them started, or alternatively, they're starting them but they're not finishing them. And it's important to figure out which one it is. Some kids need help getting started. Other kids need help getting finished. Same thing with homework. So those of you who have children at home, some of you have children who have a tough time starting their work. Others of you have children who have a tough time finishing their work within the right time frame. And it's important to know which it is because you target them differently. Okay. Getting along with peers, transitioning, following classroom routines, being on time, so forth. And we won't focus on the home ones right now. Okay. And same thing here. The Ross-Green model talks about Plan A, and Plan A is focused on delivering consequences for the problematic behavior, as he describes it. And in his view, broadly, he's not a fan of any kind of behavior management system. So, that's okay. If we use the Ross-Green model, we can also use behavior management systems at the same time. But when I think about it, his view is primarily focused on we can't punish kids out of bad behavior. At least consistent and frequent misbehavior. If punishment worked, we wouldn't have to keep using it. And, as I frequently say, for those of you in the room who were straight A students or A and B students, punishment worked really well for you because you were horrified if you got caught doing something wrong and got a punishment. And you would never, ever even have the thought of doing that same behavior again. Not that you wouldn't do the behavior again, the thought wouldn't enter your mind of doing it again once you had the punishment. That's not these kids. And so continuing to punish them, particularly if they're the subset of students who have an insecure attachment, they're going to interpret punishment as they're devalued, they're no good, they're going to get into real frequent and consistent negative self-talk, they're not going to feel secure, they're not going to feel valued, and so forth. So we can agree with that part of Plan A not being good. In a few minutes, we're going to talk about structure and security and limit setting that helps students who are insecurely attached and how we can make that real explicit for students by having behavior management systems in place for them. Okay. This part of the Plan B model that gets focused on goes right along with what we talked about earlier, which is the sense of understanding what it's like for the student and the student understanding what it's like for the teacher or the classmates. So this corresponding compatible empathy that takes place, and making sure that we listen to the child's view of the problem, making sure that we listen to the teacher's view of the problem together, right? So they talk together and then solve and then work with them to come up with a solution together. But the solution grows out of a joint understanding of what the problem is. That's the empathy step. Again, if we tie it back into what we talked about earlier, the student has to reflect, the student has to participate in some mind reading, the student has to understand the intentions and attitudes of the teacher, and the teacher has to do the same thing, right? Teachers are really good at it once they're given the opportunity to stop and catch their breath and not go from one thing to the next thing to the next thing because everything has to get done. So you block out some time, you schedule it, and you sit down and you do this together in a half hour or so. And you prep teachers ahead of time. They're really will be good at this. And even though some children are difficult, complex in their challenges. I've rarely had a situation where I tried this approach with a teacher and they completely went about it the wrong way and made things worse. I can only think of one time when that happened. Typically, teachers want the situation to get better, and they appreciate having a time where they can calmly talk about it without a crisis going on. And so that's the benefit of this piece. Okay. Okay. Is that who has tried this approach before?
Yeah, math.
Okay. And how has it gone for you? Or what do you think? What do you think have been the roadblocks, so that if other people want to use it, they can be aware of the hurdles?
One roadblock was came the week before school ended last year. So that's
you had Dr. Green come?
Well, he came virtually, sorry,
okay.
to explain the program, and we had purchased, several of us had read the book.
Mm-hmm. Which of the books did
The
you?
Explosive Child.
Okay, that's his version or the one with the other author?
That's his version.
Okay.
And then we had him come back this year just to one of our elementary schools and then the 4-5 school. And he actually did the Plan B conversation with a couple of the kids. I think the pushback from some of the staff is they're struggling to get out of that mindset of you could do both, like you just said, because they're, particularly the BCBAs, and very much about like these are the consequences for the behaviors, and so that was a challenge, and the time to give the process its due diligence, to really sit and go through it. I mean, we videoed them and then, and try to use it with the staff just to kind of debrief on the experience. But the staff didn't feel like they got a lot out of it, but I'm not sure that they were looking with the right lens either.
Okay. I think those are reasonable hurdles. I think it's new and it's different than what's been done. So you do have to put aside some of the rigidness of a strict behavioral program. The problem with the strict BCBA training is there's a strong emphasis on instructional control, and it must be done a particular way. That's going to be incompatible with trying to support someone with insecure attachment history, because control is so much a feature of it, or will adhere to control imposed by someone we trust quite a bit, or if we're inclined to trust people. But when trust is a concern, it's hard to comply with control. In fact, there's this inclination to rebel against it. That gets back to epistemic vigilance instead of epistemic trust. And so there's a not a complete understanding of all those factors and dynamics that are in play. And that's really what Dr. Green is trying to get people to move away from.
I know for me personally, I came from, started my career as a children's psyche and St. Grade, and then was just a general ed educator for over 20 years, and then was in a therapeutic outplacement as a special ed admin for 3 years, and then came back to public school. And so I did have a little bit more of that therapeutic, lens, and also the restorative practices and the relationships.
Yeah.
And so, it is a shift for people, and even for those teachers, the invested teachers, that it is about the kids, they still were struggling to fully take it.
What grade level are you?
That's I'm talking specifically when he came to my 4-5 school. So
4-5. Okay.
4th graders.
Okay. So, one of the suggestions I would make is to really focus in on one or two teachers and trying to get them to be successful with it. And then if they start telling other people that it's successful, then you might be able to pull in some of the people on the fence about it. And then if they come along, then you could pull in everyone else. You won't ever pull in 100% of the people for anything, but it does take time. But again, my view is we could spend a half hour or 45 minutes now and not spend 15 minutes every day, right? Because everything takes time. And these are the most complex students that we're talking about today. So we're going to spend the time. It's a matter of how do we want to spend it.
I liked your guidance about the lagging skills, because I'm looking in my head, I can see the sheet there, like jack, for every lagging skill. So I really kind of have them hone in on, kind of prioritizing.
And if that's the case, like they check everything, I would stop and look at it and say, my goodness, This is so important for us to understand. Imagine what it must be like to be a 9-year-old and coming to school and not having all of these skills and trying to make it through a school day. Gosh, that must be overwhelming. Well, let's see what we can do to help, something like that. Is that too rose-colored glasses approach? I think it's accurate, though, right? My goodness, what it must be like for that child. Yeah.
I found that, in feedback from some teachers, they feel like restorative justice takes away their power and authority, and that, at least in my experience, a better starting point has been looking at power and privilege as a teacher in the education system. And there's a great book called Restorative Heart Set.
Oh.
And I can send the link if you'd like. But it's really great, educator to educator language about those systems and about how that affects how we view our roles of authority and what authority is and what the future of authority can be. And this is, really more of the future of that.
Yeah.
We have to start with that mindset and really deconstructing these systems that have built up punishment.
Yes.
Consequence, rather than trying to gain the other child's perspective when they should just follow the rules. They're wrong. Why does it matter to get their perspective? Because it's just wrong. It's flawed.
Mm-hmm. And so the interesting piece of that is, without getting too much, I totally agree with you, Mackenzie. There is, we have centuries of socialization, particularly in the school setting, of students should just do what we tell them to do because we've told them to do it. And that's been effective for many generations. That doesn't mean it's been good for many generations. I had a counseling session this week with a 25-year-old who went to religious school, so it was very strict. And he was talking about the difficulties he has with relationships and accepting compliments and giving compliments and how that's been hard on his dating relationships. And he said, you know what? I was just thinking, when I was growing up, I went to this Christian school and a real Christian family, and we weren't supposed to take pride in anything we did. We were just supposed to do it because we were told to do it, and that's what you're supposed to do, and don't brag or anything. I think that's really messed me up. And that was a good insight because it was so extreme for him, this authority, just do it, don't talk about it, don't question it. It's hasn't been great, right? And that could be the case. The other thing I think we also have to realize is a very important factor in why schools run smoothly is because of the relationships that the teachers have with the students. I mean, in reality, there's a lot more students than there are teachers. If the students ever got themselves together, they could just completely take charge. And there's nothing we could do about it. And the reason they allow us to be the authorities, us as the adults broadly, is because they know that we're looking out for them and that we are trying to create a secure environment for them and help them. But in certain settings where they realize, even a small number of them, that we're not looking out for them, that we're phoning it in, they will rebel. And they will rebel in as much as they can get away with without making their lives any more miserable than absolutely necessary as part of their rebellion. So some kids will sleep in class. That's as far as they'll push it. Some kids will vandalize. That's as far as they'll push it. Some kids will stage a protest. There's different ways that they do it, but the only reason we're in charge is because they let us be in charge, right? So those teachers who are focused on control have it backwards. You should let them read Lord of the Flies, again, so they can grasp what's actually the case. Okay. So the empathy step is really important, and children will respond well to it, and if the adults do, they will see that there's this tremendous benefit. There's this piece of, again, the student having a part in solving the problem, having a sense of agency, having a sense that I'm a person with thoughts and impressions and experiences, and you, the adults, are interested in my thoughts, experiences, and impressions, and you're willing to work with me to make this better, and to make this better for me, the student. The focus of this is not how can we make it better so the teacher's day is better. The focus is how can we make this better so the student's day is better. And they rarely have a conversation like that, directly and explicitly. And so that's what happens here. And then there's a compromise where there's this collaboration, and the adults say, okay, we're going to do this differently. And the student says, okay, I'm going to do this differently. And that's where the collaborative problem solving comes into play. And I like this picture because that was a great collaborative problem solving in that movie. Right? Those of you who don't know the movie, it's Good Will Hunting. Is anyone unfamiliar? If you are, your homework this weekend is to watch Good Will Hunting. All right. So that's just a broad overview of this approach. And now we'll talk about, I know you're all familiar with behavior management, so I want to talk about some principles of behavior management strategies that overlay or click in with the principles of attachment, mentalization-based counseling, and how behavior management plays a role in that, right? I got to switch gears here. Hang on one second. Okay. All right. So the behavior management systems and the model that I will speak to you from is the Tough Kid Book model. Who's familiar with the Tough Kid Book? Dr. Loss, you're familiar with the Tough Kid Book. That's Dr. Pedro takes a lot of his stuff from the Tough Kid Book. Okay. So in those books in our conference room, a lot of it's the same. So the Tough Kid Book, I would recommend that you all get. And there's two pieces. There's the Tough Kid Book and the Tough Kid Toolbox if you want to do behavior management in an effective way. Everything that's described and explained in the Tough Kid Book has been trialed, replicated, and replicated again by the struggling graduate students at the University of Utah, and also over the years some at UConn. Did anyone go to UConn school psych program? Okay, there's a professor up there, Dr. Bray, Melissa Bray. There used to be someone up there named Tom Kale. Tom passed away a few years ago, and he did some of the work with this too. But these are proven effective strategies for improving behavior with students. I have let people borrow my Tough Kid Book on occasion, and I have never gotten it back. I think I've purchased it for the fourth time now over the years. People get it, and they like it so much they keep it, which is okay, because it's really good work. So I'll talk a little bit about the basic principles and then show you a few of the strategies from it. I'm missing a slide here. Okay. I'll have to go off memory now. Okay. The basic principles here that go with what we were talking about earlier are using behavior management systems to help with creating safety and security because of boundaries and limits that are in place. Okay? And by that, we clearly define expectations for students. And we We have to be careful in defining these expectations that we phrase them positively and in a framework of what we want the student to do. We don't want the behavioral expectations to be, don't do this thing. We want the behavioral expectation to be phrased as, do this thing. Okay? Things will go well for you when you do A, B, and C. And then we have to define what A, B, and C are. When you're writing a behavioral goal, here's a thing to keep in mind, as the authors of this book phrase it, it's the dead man rule. If a dead person can do it, it's not a good rule. So that would be sit still. Not a good rule. Don't talk. Not a good rule. It's also phrased negatively. Don't fidget. Okay? So those aren't the way we want our rules to be phrased. So typically we want rules to be things that students can do, and if the students are doing them, rules, behavioral expectations, however you want to phrase it. Sometimes it's not good to phrase this as rules. What I usually, how I would usually phrase it is, well, for one, when it was the expectations in my counseling groups, it would be Mr. Brown's good behavior goals. If it's being designed for an individual student, it would be Chris's good behaviors, something simple like that, rather than rules that can be broken, I guess is the way to think of it. So, what are some good rules that if a student does these behaviors, it will be very, very difficult to simultaneously misbehave? Have you guys set up behavioral goals before? Okay, I'll just tell you. Mr. Brown's rules were in my counseling groups. Now again, these counseling groups were all the kids who had the most behavioral challenges. That's why they were in a counseling group, right? So the rules were, do what Mr. Brown says right away. That's my favorite rule. Okay. Do what Mr. Brown says right away. Now, I'll tell you in a minute how I present these rules to the students, but one is do what Mr. Brown says right away. Another is listen when other people are talking. Okay, that was a top rule. And the third one was use kind words. That's it. Sometimes with some groups I would add in use your body for helping. Rather than keep your hands to yourself, don't hit, don't kick, don't throw things, was use your body for helping. Usually I didn't have to have that one in, but sometimes I had it for some. Now the reason, because I think it's good to give a reason or understanding of my view, right, because we want to reflect or help children to reflect and understand. Why is one of the rules do what Mr. Brown says right away? Because Mr. Brown is a power-hungry, authoritative, demanding person. That's not the reason. The reason the first rule is do what Mr. Brown says right away is because when we get together in my office for group, we have a lot of fun things that we want to do together. And we have things that we have to learn together. And we don't have a lot of time together. I wish we had more time together. I love spending time with all of you. But we only have so much time when you can be here with me and with the other guys who are in the group. So, in order for us to do all the fun things and to learn what it's important for you to learn, we can't waste time. So you can get the most out of your time here, and you can have the most fun when we're together. it's going to be important that you do what I say right away. That's the first rule. Okay, great. Second rule is listen when other people are talking. The reason it's important to listen when other people are talking is there are things that you're going to say in here that are really important, and there are things that other kids in here that are going to say are really important. And we can't rewind in here. We can't go backwards and hear it again. And we also, like I said before, don't have too much time together. If we have to keep stopping and repeating things, we're going to run out of time and not get to do all the fun things. So we want to make sure we're listening so we hear it. The other thing is, if you're saying something important and the other people aren't listening, how does that make you feel? How does it make you feel? Not good, right? Not good in what way?
It makes me feel like I'm not important.
Yes, and you are important. Everyone, and thank you, Lily. Everyone in here is important, and we want to make sure that we treat people as important as they are. And sometimes the word we use is respect. We're going to respect each other, and we want to make sure that we listen to other people, and then they will listen to us. That's the other thing. And the last rule is when we're in here, since we're going to be having fun together and we're going to be respecting each other and learning things, we want to make sure that we use kind words when we're in here. We want to make sure that the words we say help people feel better, not feel worse. So let me ask you, how do you want to feel when you're in here working together as a group? How would you like to feel? This goes along with the ruler approach also. So we're combining some approaches here. How would you like to feel when you're in here in group? Good. What would it mean to feel good? What would be some way you would feel?
Comfortable, happy.
Comfortable, happy. What else?
Accepted.
Accepted. Yeah. Right? Can everyone agree that when they're here they want to feel comfortable, happy, and accepted? Yeah, me too. Okay, so one way that we can make sure that happens is if we use kind words when we're talking to each other, okay? And that we let people know when they've done something well. And if we don't like something, we'll still use kind words, but we can say, I don't like it when you do that. Or we can say, please don't do that. That's bothering me. Okay. How does that sound? If we say those things, we will feel comfortable, happy, and accepted. Great. Can we all agree to that? Perfect. Those are our rules. Okay? And then that's it. That's how you set up rules. You can do that with teenagers too. When I worked in the alternative high school, we set up what we called a classroom charter. And so we got 15 high school students who are in an alternative high school program for a particular reason, which is because of tremendous challenges, usually related to behavior, view of themselves, and important interpersonal relationships. And on the first day of school, we would sit in a room together and say, okay, how do you want to feel when you come to school each day this year? And the first time I did it, the rest of the teachers thought I was nuts. They said, these kids are never going to be able to do that. And the first year we did it, we got it taken care of in about 45 minutes. And the kids loved that someone actually asked them, how do you want to feel when you come to school? And they got their input on how they could make it happen. Right? Young people can do lots of good things when we let them know that we're genuinely interested in it and that we're going to sincerely give them the opportunity. And we politely and without sarcasm deflect the silly comments that they make because they're 14 and 14-year-olds make silly comments when you're trying to do some serious work. Right? We can do that too. Okay, so you work with teachers or you work with kids that you're counseling to set up behavioral goals. Can you think of other goals that you might want to have in place in a classroom when you're working with a teacher to set up a system? First one, most teachers like, is do what Mrs. Jones says right away. They're all going to be on board with that one. Okay. That's compliance, right? That's okay. Can we just do what I say, please? So that one goes over pretty well. Another one is to complete my assignments. Maybe they're completing math but not reading, so we just focus on the one that they're not completing, complete my reading work. Maybe it's that they typically do comply, and the only problem is that they don't line up when it's time to leave the classroom. Okay. Bubba will line up with only one repetition when it's time to leave the classroom. They're customizable. Okay. Make sense? Easy enough? Okay. So let's look at a behavior tracking form. That worked. Okay. So this is a straightforward behavior tracking form. This is a little bit busy, but it gets it all on one sheet. And then you could modify this to, there's a lot of different ways to modify this. But once we have the goals set, we have to have a behavior tracking form because we have to be able to give the student feedback at a specified number of times to let the student know that they're doing a good job. Okay, does that make sense? So if we want students to start reflecting on what they're doing, if we want students to start understanding the importance of their actions and being goal-directed and planning how to get through a day, we have to make sure we tell them how they're doing, and that we can't just hope that they know how they're doing. And the goal with this, with these target behaviors being phrased positively, this forces us to tell the student when they do what they're supposed to. Because usually when kids do exactly what they're supposed to, which makes perfect sense, we take it for granted. You should just do what you're supposed to do, right? So this is where we're going to, with these select group of kids, give them specific feedback when they do exactly what we want them to do without ignoring it. Okay, pretty simple. And what we say to the students when we introduce the behavior tracking form is, and it has to be this explicit, we say to them, we know, and I'm saying we because it's usually a mental health provider and the teacher introducing this, we know how hard you've been working to make sure that you do a good job when you come to school. And some days are harder than others. But one of the things that we realized we weren't doing is that we weren't telling you what a great job you're doing. Sometimes you do a great job and we forget to tell you. So we have this form, and what this form is going to make sure we do is tell you when you've done a great job with these 3 behaviors. So you can see at the top of the form there's 3 target behaviors. It could be 4, it could be 5, it could be 2, however you want. This form is designed for 3. We want to make sure we tell you when you've done a good job. Would you like it for us to tell you when you're doing a good job? Of course, yes, thank you, that'd be great. Okay. The thing we have to be careful of is that this isn't one more tool to let the child know that they're incompetent, that they lack skills, that they're incapable, that they're frustrating, that we don't like having them around, that they're making our life miserable, or however else they might interpret or perceive a tool that blames them. And that's a subtle piece, but it's a really important piece. These tools have to be used to build positive momentum, not to point out the errors. And here's a hurdle we have to get past. Suppose the rules are, or the target behaviors are, do what the teacher says right away, use kind words, use my body for helping. Okay? What's something that could be a frustrating behavior that the student could do that doesn't have anything to do with those rules? So the rules are do what Mrs. Brown says right away, use kind words, and use my body for helping. What's something a student could do that wouldn't meet those?
interrupting.
Yeah, talking out. Exactly. Talking out is a common troubling behavior that is not part of those rules. And so the student talks out during the setting there would be like circle time, morning circle. So, right? During circle time, the student talks out. And because the student talks out, the teacher gives a rating for circle time of 1, 1, 1 for all 3 target behaviors. And that is probably the worst thing that we could do for a student who is struggling with insecure attachment and poor epistemic trust, right? Because look, we had a deal. I was going to do these things. Talking out wasn't one of the things that we agreed that you were going to give me feedback on. And I did all these other things exactly the same, and you gave me the poorest rating. Or with little kids, we do a sad face, happy face. It's not a 5-point rating, whatever. That is so confusing, and it's just using the tool to bash the student. We have to be really careful about that, and we have to explicitly tell teachers not to do that. And how do you do that without insulting the teacher? You say something like this. When I've used these forms before, there are some teachers who misunderstand. And one of the things that they've done is they've rated the student on behaviors that aren't on the target behavior list. And it's so confusing for the student when they've done the things on the target behavior list, but they did something else that was pretty frustrating, pretty bad. And what the teacher in that case did is gave bad ratings for all the good things that were done. Oh, you can imagine how confused the student was. So I know you probably wouldn't do that, but I thought the last teacher wouldn't do it, so I'm just pointing it out because it's an easy mistake to make, particularly when you have so many things going on and you can get frustrated. So we want to make sure that we only rate the target behaviors. Is that okay? Oh, sure, of course, I would never do that. I know, I'm just, it happened, so I just wanted to let you know, we got to be careful. Great. Simple. 30 seconds over, and it makes the point, right? If they say, who was the teacher that did that? Say, that's unimportant. If you worked in a different school at some point, you could say, it was another school. If you've only worked at that school, just say it's unimportant, or it happened in your internship, right? Something like that. Okay. So we have the rules, the target behaviors. We have the feedback form. Now, the next step and the last step is, what happens when the student is successfully meeting the target behaviors? What do we do? Reward them, praise them. Yeah. Okay. And so this is a really important piece. You're going to say something else, Brittany?
No, I can let you finish and then I was...
Okay. So we reward them or praise them, and encourage them. The delivery of the rewards is important. It's an important feature on how we do this. And the delivery of the rewards, I've always met the most success by delivering rewards in a game fashion. Children like to play games, right? We know this. Children like the anticipation of winning something, right? And we want children to be able to win. And we want them to win at doing what we would like them to do rather than winning at doing what they would like to do, right? So we're trying to get our priorities to be their priorities. One good way to do that with young people is to create a attainable challenge for them where there's this chance of winning or losing. And this gets back to some basic behavioral science. And we won't get into the behavioral principles, we don't have time. But, okay. It's why people go to slot machines and put money in slot machines. It's the same principle. Okay. So what are some gamey ways to do this? Let me just back up here. My favorite is behavior bingo. and I ran my counseling groups, it was Mr. Brown's Behavior Bingo. So what happens here is for this behavior that's being tracked, when a student attains a certain number of positive ratings for the behavior that's being tracked, they get to pick a number that gets marked off on the bingo board. The bingo board is just like playing bingo. You have to get a complete row or column to win bingo. Right? It's nothing fancier than that. The easiest way to do this is to photocopy this, laminate it, and then when the student reaches the number of positive check marks or whatever on the behavior tracking form, they pick a number, and then that number is marked off on the bingo card. Once the student wins bingo, you get your wet paper towel, clear off the marks, and you start a new game right away. Okay. And then, once you win bingo, then you get some type of a prize for winning the game. Straightforward enough? So the good thing about this is you could delay gratification because you could start off with a 3x3 card and then move up to a 5x5 card or a 6x6 card. At one point, I was working in a school where I made a 10x10 card with 100 squares to do for an entire 6th grade of 3 classrooms where behavior was not going well. And that had some complexity to it because there were lots of kids, but we figured out a way to do it, and it worked great. Behavior improved almost instantly. So you could do this individually or a group working together to win bingo. Okay. Now we've turned it into a game where your behavior is being tracked and you're earning points or getting positive feedback a certain number of times, and you get to pick a bingo number. The next thing is what happens when you win bingo. How is the prize delivered? Now this is also important because we like to use mystery motivators. So mystery motivators are where you don't tell the student what the prize is. Because the research says children and people are more willing to work for a reward if they don't know what the reward is than if they do know what the reward is. Surprising? Okay. So there's a couple ways to do mystery motivators. One is, I used to use this invisible ink pen one. You get these color changeable Crayola markers. Has anyone had those before? So with invisible ink, you put a star in some of these squares. And if you win bingo on a particular day, you color in the square for that day. And if there's a star behind it, when you color in the square, you get the mystery prize. The mystery prize is held in an envelope that you have in your office, and in a slip of paper you write the reward on it. Right? Pretty easy, pretty straightforward. Now the way you do this to build positive momentum is, in invisible ink you put a star in every box. So no matter what day they win, when you get started, they get the prize. And then to delay gratification, you change it up. Okay. Another way to deliver mystery motivators is you get 4 envelopes, or let's start with an easier one. You get 6 envelopes, and you put the numbers 1 through 6 on them. And then you get a big dice, and when the students win bingo, they get to roll the dice. Whatever it lands on, 1 through 6, they open up the number or the envelope with the corresponding number, and they get that prize. Or you can get a spinner from your favorite board game, and however many slots there are on the spinner, you get envelopes for that, and then they spin the spinner, whatever it lands on, they get. You get the bubble bouncer from a game of Trouble, and they bounce that and whatever. So there's lots of different ways to do this. The thing is, it will keep the students motivated to keep working towards winning the prize when there's some game involved with it. If it's you get a certain number of points and you get this thing, it gets boring and old quick. If you continue to change it up, they stay interested and motivated. And these are just some of the ideas from the Tough Kid book and the Tough Kid Toolbox, but they're all in there. Another one is a reinforcement tower or a chart mover. This one is, in one of the schools I'm working, the teacher has, she had this little space. This is a whole classroom thing. When the students meet the target behaviors after each part of the day, and she judges if the majority of the students did it or not, she has a rocket ship, and at the bottom of this column would be Earth, like here, and then at the top is the moon, and she's got this rocket ship with ticky-tack on the back of it, and when the students meet the behavioral expectations, the rocket ship moves. And she's got like stars that the rocket ship is moving to until it gets to the moon. So they can see how close they're getting, and they're all working together to get there. The other thing, after 2 weeks of the rocket ship getting to the moon, if there's some behaviors that are really intense and not complying with the rules, the rocket ship starts to move backwards. And when the rocket ship moves backwards, it's delivered as, "I am so sorry, boys and girls." But today, when we were transitioning to go to lunch, and so many of you weren't lining up, and you were pushing and shoving, and so-and-so fell down and got hurt, we cannot have that happening. People don't feel safe when that happens in our classroom. And remember, I want everyone to feel safe. So since that happened, I know you're all trying really hard, but you have to remember that we can't do that. And as a reminder, I'm going to move the rocket ship backwards, closer to Earth. We need to have positive energy in here for the rocket ship to move forward. Simple, right? So then, when the question becomes, what should the consequence be for the students doing what they did? Oh, we don't have to come up with a consequence. We're just going to move the rocket ship backwards. Now, the rocket ship moving backwards is only helpful if the students are interested in what happens when the rocket ship reaches the moon, right? But it all plays in together. That is compatible with Ross Green's model, right? There's nothing that would interfere with Plan B if you're doing that. So I think the two can exist simultaneously. The other thing that's happening when we're doing this kind of thing is you could set up a rocket ship moving for a single student. It could be for 3 students working together. I like the behavior bingo for self-contained classrooms. So there's a classroom I'm consulting with now. We put behavior bingo in place. The behavior improved in less than 2 weeks. And each week when I'm in the room, I'm there for like an hour and a half, 2 hours most weeks. Without fail, several times while I'm there, I'll hear a student who walks by the bingo chart and say, "Hey, we're getting close to bingo." Or if the student's misbehaving, another student will say, "Hey, stop doing that. Look how close we are to bingo. If you do that, she could take a number off." That's the consequence with bingo. A number earned can be lost if there's extreme misbehavior. We don't implement the consequence part of it until we build positive momentum over several weeks. Okay. So, I'll get to your question in 1 second, Brittany.
I have to go close. Thank you so much.
Okay, see you later. That's the end of the presentation. So, to summarize, we understand why these students who had insecure attachments will present with challenges in school that we need to help them with. We have a good understanding of figuring out, is trauma, either capital T trauma or small t trauma, the underlying reason or one of the contributing factors to the struggles. And we have a counseling approach. a collaborative approach and a behavior management approach to help with these students. I know we spent most of the time on the counseling approach. That's the hardest part, so that's why we spent the most time on it. Okay. Questions? Comments?
I feel like in my experience, the counseling approach is really where the benefit comes most from. For the really kids who really struggle, I feel like the behavior pieces of it, while they're, I think, sometimes helpful in the moment, the bigger picture work really comes more from the counseling.
Yeah, I think the behavior systems are helpful because of the feedback it provides and this, the clarity of the expectations, and truly because we forget to say, hey, you did a great job. The other good piece, I think, of the behavioral system is there are some misbehaviors that need a consequence, and I think that we can spend so much time trying to figure out what's the right consequence. Well, when we have a behavior system in place, the consequence is built in. Oh, you aren't earning your points. You're losing a bingo card or a bingo number that you earned, or you don't get to add a bingo number. I mean, there are so many consequences. We don't have to come up with some extreme punishment. And that's the phase that we have to, some of you spoke to today, of for these young people, coming up with the right punishment is not going to lead to any kind of noteworthy improvement. In fact, there's a good chance that it's going to move us in the wrong direction for these young people. It's not that they don't feel bad about what they're doing, they just don't know what to do differently. And again, if we remember that short 5-minute video clip, less than 5-minute video clip, their brain is moving them through the world in a way to protect them from what they have learned, what their brain has learned to anticipate, and how their body has learned to respond to what the brain is predicting. It's actually, in some ways we could probably say ethically wrong to punish these children because of what their brains have learned to do without any input from them. That gets back to what Mackenzie was saying, right? For sure. If you're interested in those ideas about the brain and how it moves people in particular directions, there's a really, what I think is a well-done book. You might find it somewhat controversial, but it's called Determined, and it's by Robert Sapolsky, who's a neuroscientist, professor emeritus at Stanford, California. He wrote another book that's also very good a few years ago called Behave. They're long and have lots of footnotes, both of them, but they're really good. And if you don't want to spend the time reading the book, you could look up Dr. Sapolsky's TED Talk. It's Sapolsky. Robert Sapolsky. He's got this big bushy beard, glasses. He looks like a hippie. His TED Talk is great. His books are some of my favorite books, and they overlay with what we talked about today. Completely different topic, but absolutely overlay with what we talked about today. And then that video we saw was Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett, who's a psychology professor at Northeastern, and her book is called How Emotions Are Made. These books are written for lay people, but you'll understand them better being mental health providers. And if you have a long drive or several short drives, you can listen to a great interview with that gets into what we talked about today with Dr. Feldman Barrett on the Huberman Lab podcast, Huberman. It's like a 2-hour episode. His podcasts are all long. Dr. Huberman is a professor also at Stanford, I think, in ophthalmology and neuroscience. but he interviews mental health providers and psychologists. This podcast with Dr. Feldman Barrett is fabulous. If you like this kind of thing, which I do, so, as you can tell. All right. Dr. Loss, did you want to say something?
Yeah, no, I just want to thank everybody for coming. One of the things, as Chris mentioned, we did videotape, so if you have colleagues who weren't able to make it, it's available, it's on demand. You know,
In a couple of weeks, we'll have it available.
we'll have it all uploaded and ready to go. If you feel like, you know, some of this would also be that much more effective in person, you know, then, you know, certainly we do provide districts with lots of trainings. Chris gets out to school districts all the time, and can work individually with teams and on a variety of different topic areas. But, you know, this area being a really critical one, as he outlined today, because it's not just a one-shot-fits-all, you know, kind of approach. So yeah, thank you all.
If you were thinking that you might want some of your colleagues to hear this, or you wanted to do a training in your district, one of the things I've done when districts have called me is I've said, why don't you invite or talk to a director in your neighboring districts, and we could all, you could all get together and defray the cost a little bit and get more people in the room and a variety of experiences to talk about. I recently did that. One district called me about the personality assessment training that CBH did in October, and we ended up with 5 districts coming together. So it's, that's an economical way for districts to manage this too. And we tried to do it on a PD day, so everyone's getting together anyway. So you can keep that in mind too. We're happy to do that. Okay. All right. Once my email is freed up and I'm allowed to use it again, I'm going to send you a survey to just get some feedback for Ryan and myself, so that we can improve our training sessions that we do. And if there was something that you wanted in your district, but you wanted the focus to be changed, we'll customize anything. So we'll be happy to do that. Emphasize one section more than another or whatever. Okay. All right, everyone.